Viewers, the big meeting tonight is going to take place between Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Biden. This is going to happen over digital. This is not going to be a face-to-face meeting. It's a virtual meeting, but it happens, viewers, under the shadow. Yes, the leader of the world's largest and oldest democracy are meeting virtually. The meeting is foreshadowed by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The Russian invasion has creased ordinarily smooth Indo-US ties. The United States is upset with India because India acted in its own interests and didn't dance to Washington's tune by voting against strategic ally Russia. A few weeks ago, the US visiting Deputy National Security Advisor Dileep Singh made comments that bordered on threats when Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov visited New Delhi. Today, we are being told Biden is going to try and lean on Modi to take a stand against Russia. Highly placed sources have told Times Now that Prime Minister Modi is going to draw a firm line, not in the sand, but in the stone, for Biden, making it clear that he needs to back down and appreciate India's own legitimate reasons for taking an independent position. Will the United States do so? Are its demands of India unreasonable? Is it being patronizing of India by thinking Delhi will meekly follow Biden's lead? These are some specific questions we're going to pose to our experts. But before that, we're going to go straight across to Craig Boswell, a very experienced journalist who covers the Hill, Capitol Hill, government. Craig Boswell, thank you very much for joining us here on Times Now. What's on the agenda for this meeting?
Oh, look, there is a lot on the agenda for this meeting. There are meetings around the meetings. I'm outside the State Department right now. You'll have the virtual meeting between President Biden and Prime Minister Modi. You'll have the 2+2 talks. Each of these ministers will meet with their counterparts here in D.C. Jaishankar is expected to also meet with high-level members, senior members of the Biden administration. So in this India-U.S. relationship, there are always meetings around the meetings, and there are a lot of things on the agenda. You know, always there's this defense cooperation, there's logistics, there's intelligence sharing. But as you mentioned, Russia-Ukraine certainly clouding some of these talks. It's certainly going to be an issue that is going to have to be discussed. As you mentioned, there is pressure. There's pressure on here in the U.S. on President Biden to step up pressure on New Delhi to get on board with a condemnation of the Russian invasion, to get on board with sanctions. Those will be part of these talks. But keep in mind, while there is a temptation to kind of reassess the U.S.-India relation on some, there's a bigger picture. And the bigger picture, of course, comes down to one word, and that is China. The U.S.-India relationship, it needs and depends on each other to balance China. So that's the big picture. Immediately now, though, as you mentioned, there is this focus on Russia, Ukraine. Now, the U.S. also has stated that it does want India to cut defense purchases from Russia. That may be something that will be talked about in the 2+2 dialogue, potentially this meeting between President Biden and Prime Minister Modi. We've heard from the Defense Secretary before, from Lloyd Austin, before congressional testimony, that the U.S. expects India to scale down dependence on Russian military equipment, military tanks, artillery, missile systems. A big point of contention, of course, will be this air defense system that's potentially being bought. But make no mistake, while these are points of differences, there are many areas in this current relationship of common strategic interests, this shared Indo-Pacific interest. India is a major defense partner with the U.S. and was named that in 2016. That puts India on par with U.S. largest allies when it comes to purchasing technologies, very high-level technologies, those that are sensitive. And there's been billions, literally probably more than $3 billion over the last year or two just in defense purchases between India and U.S., and probably more than $15 billion since 2008. So in answer to your question, there is a lot on the table. There is a lot of pressure, and there's a lot of background on this Russia-Ukraine, this Russian invasion of Ukraine, the pressure on that. And the big picture, of course, is for U.S. and India to maintain their ties when it comes to balancing China.
Well, Craig, very quickly, what is the expectation from the American side. Now, we know that, and we're getting visuals of that meeting between Rajnath Singh and his U.S. counterpart, Lloyd Austin, who's the defense secretary there in America. That meeting is on. We also know that Jaishankar has met Blinken. That meeting happened about 2 hours back and went on for a while. What's the expectation? Is there going to be an expectation from the U.S. side? India tomorrow starts suddenly voting against Russia, or is that just an expectation for the long term?
You know what? That remains to be seen. But when you talk about expectations, of course, there are expectations. There are going to be asks. There are going to be what some will call demands. If you talk to members of Congress, they're going to be demands. If you talk to senior members of the administration, they will say these are points of contention that we intend to bring up strongly with India. But ask, and you don't always receive, but you always ask. These are talks that may be a little tense at times because there are some differences on this. There will be expectations on the U.S. side that there at least be a condemnation of this Russian invasion. That is very unlikely from the Indian side. So it's not going to drive a wedge, but it is a point of contention as we talk today. But as we've heard from President Biden before, and as we've heard from members of this administration, this U.S.-India relationship is key, though right now there are some issues to discuss.
Thanks indeed. Do keep an eye out for us on those important talks and the outcome. We've already beginning to get the first glimpse of the meeting between the Defense Secretary and, of course, the Defense Minister. To your right, viewers, on your screen, we're going to keep that image there because any moment the Prime Minister will virtually begin to speak with President Biden, and we are hoping for some sound bites to emerge from that. Craig Bosworth, thank you very much, reporting from Foggy Bottom, which is, of course, the other name for the State Department. Thank you very much. We'll be right back with you. Viewers, some basic questions tonight, and let me open this up. The first question: can America, that is notorious for putting its own interests first, lecture India on not doing so? And I want to go straight across to Derek Grossman, Senior Research Analyst, the RAND. Mr. Grossman, what's your response?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me again, Rahul. I think today's a really big day in the U.S.-India partnership. Obviously, we have the Modi-Biden virtual summit coming up, and we have the 2+2 meetings ongoing that you're showing on the screen here. And I think that, yes, Russia looms large over these meetings because the Biden administration has made it a priority to uphold this rules-based international order. And as I've said on your show before, one sovereign country invading and destroying another sovereign country is completely contrary to maintaining that rules-based order. So I think the Biden administration is going to push hard on Russia privately, but at the same time, keep in mind that the relationship between the U.S. and India, the partnership, is much broader than just Russia. And, you know, your correspondent earlier mentioned China as another key issue, but there's many, many others there as well. So I don't expect Russia in any way to dent the U.S.-India partnership for now, but I do worry that over the long run, there are differences between the U.S. and India in terms of their perspective on what it means to maintain that rules-based order and when it is time to take action to prevent authoritarian countries from doing bad things around the world.
General Bakshi, it's important for India to realize when it needs to step up and maintain the international rules-based order. Washington has expectations on this count from us. What's your response, sir?
Sorry, was that?
Look,
okay.
The simple fact is we are heading towards a multipolar order if we are not already there. And in a multipolar order, there are a few characteristics. India will be a key swing state, whether you like it or not. India, by virtue of its military, economic power, its stability of its government, it's got a government which has got a strong, 2/3 majority. So it's not a government like Pakistan's which can be swung around by a few votes here and there. You see, you have to deal with that reality. It is a government that will give primacy to India's national interests. They take primacy. You see, we suffered earlier out of friendship when Iran was damned. It was the cheapest, nearest source of oil to us. We took a hit trying to please the United States, and what did we get? What did we get? So I think we have learnt our lessons. We are not about to kneel. We are not the 51st state of the United States. That should be clear. We will act in our own enlightened self-interest.
Well, General Bakshi making it very clear.
When China put pressure on India,
yes.
When China put pressure on India, what help did we get from the United States? I mean, they took a neutral stance and they hoped for peace and talks and dialogue between the two sides.
Okay.
So I think we also know where our interests lie.
Okay.
Is the United States prepared to give us nuclear submarines on lease? Russia is. Is the United States prepared to give us F-35s or F-22s? Russia is. I mean, they are prepared to give us the cutting-edge technology. They are prepared to cooperate with us in bringing this thing. So I don't think we can go and poke Russia in the eye just to please the United States or anybody else.
Charles Kupchan. Let me bring in Charles Kupchan, Senior Fellow at the Center on Foreign Relations and former member of the National Security Council under President Obama and Clinton. Mr. Kupchan, has the American administration been insensitive to and patronizing of India's interests by expressing its displeasure at India's independence stand in the light of what General Bakshi has also just said?
No, I think that General Bakshi overstates the choice. The United States is not asking India to be the 51st state. Let me just make three basic points here. Number one, India does want to be on the right side of history. India sees itself as a moral force in the world. Right now, India is not on the right side of history. It is not speaking up against an unprovoked Russian invasion of Ukraine that is leading to, on a daily, hourly basis, huge atrocities. Number two, in the long run, the real threat that India faces comes from China. The United States wants to pull India into an Indo-Pacific architecture in which it sides with the world's democracies to help contain China. And I think that India's investment in standing up to Russia now would be a good investment in its relationship with the United States, with the Indo-Pacific structure in counter China. My final point, I think that with deft diplomacy, India can walk the fine line between breaking with Russia and standing up to Russia. India can speak its voice. India can say what's happening in Ukraine is illegal and immoral, and at the same time, find ways to preserve what is a good relationship with Moscow. And let's be honest, India has influence in Moscow because of the history of good ties, because of its arms sales. Modi needs to speak the truth to Vladimir Putin.
Okay, were you on the right side of history, Mr. Kupchan, when you encouraged regime change in Iran in the 50s and brought eventually a king, unpopular as he was, and after that clerics to rule? Were you on the right side of history when you dropped bombs on Iraq and flattened various cities like Mosul to the ground and killed several 100,000 kids in Vietnam, innocent women, napalmed them to a point of complete annihilation, when you propped dictators, kleptocrats, walked into Serbia? I mean, there are many, many examples, aren't there?
Yeah, there are many examples, and we can discuss each one. And yes, the United States has made mistakes in its foreign policy, right?
Okay.
Most recently, Afghanistan, where the U.S. tried for 2 decades to bring stability and democracy, and it didn't work. And now the country's ruled by the Taliban, and there's a humanitarian nightmare. But two wrongs do not make a right, Rahul.
Two wrongs do
Just
not make a
because the
right. I
United
agree with
States
you.
made
They
a big
don't.
mistake
But
in
it
its
does
past
cost
doesn't
one
mean
country.
that India today
Sure.
should not
I
speak up
agree
and
with you.
stand up.
I'm on the same page. Two wrongs don't make a right, but it does reduce the ability of one wrongdoer to preach to another country that might have certain very important reasons to stand independent right now. And it's not because we don't want to be on the right side of history. Do you agree, Mr. Sushant Sareen?
Rahul, in the rough and tumble of international politics, let's not talk about the right or the wrong side of history. In fact, it's a completely fallacious argument, number one. Number two, I think we have always acted in our enlightened self-interest, even when we stopped buying Iranian oil. And I say that because we had alternative supplies of oil available, number one. Number two, had we persisted with buying Iranian oil, there would have been certain consequences which we did not want. Let's face it, Iran brings very little to the table compared to what the United States brings. So that is why I say it was in our enlightened self-interest. Number three, yes, the Americans can be a weapon supplier, but can we afford F-35s? And I don't think so. And for now, I don't think there's any easy replacement to the Russian weapons systems that we have in our arsenal, or some of the new systems which we are buying. We haven't got those on offer as yet from anywhere else. And frankly, maybe it's also about the price and other things. Number four, precisely because we have some political capital with the Russians, I don't think we should expend it on something as silly as, why are you buying $1 billion worth of oil from the Russians? Why are you not saying something to the Russians, as if our saying something to the Russians will end this war? We have said enough in the various statements which we have made, and we have only escalated that matter. If you look at our statements, we have only agitated the matter further. And finally, it's all very well to argue that you should take a position on Russia today, because what if China does this tomorrow? Because India takes a position against Russia today, I don't think that's going to stop a madman in China, in Beijing, somebody like a Xi Jinping, who's trying to make an entire sea his personal lake. I don't think that's going to stop Xi Jinping. And finally, staying with China, I don't care whether the Americans came to our assistance when, tensions along East Ladakh were happening. But my point is that the Chinese are browbeating their small neighbors. They are encroaching on territory of countries even like Bhutan.
Okay.
How much noise has the Americans made? What kind of sanctions or what kind of penalties have they imposed on the Chinese? You can't say that because it suits your economic interests to not decouple from China just yet, you have to continue maintaining that relationship with the Chinese. But India should start decoupling from the Russians because you want it. And last and not the least, I don't think you should fall for this multipolarity stuff. I don't think multipolarity is coming anytime soon. I still think the Americans are going to be the paramount power for at least the next 2 decades, if not longer. And yes, the Chinese will want to play catch up. The Russians are nowhere on the scene.
But I just hope tonight
I think we should,
that there is appetite in Washington.
Act in our own enlightened self-interest.
Absolutely. Enlightened is the word. Self-interest is another very important suffix. Viewers, I just hope that there is appetite in Biden and in Washington for Indian straight talk, because Modi is known to do some straight talking. Any moment now, we are being told that meeting is going to be underway. Let me tell you, and I just want to quickly bring our reporter into this also, Craig Boswell. Any moment now, that meeting begins, and we're already being told that it's going to set really the tone for the 2+2 meetings, and of course, strengthening defense ties, free and open Indo-Pacific region. All these issues are going to come up. Science and technological cooperation. We are being told that an important MOU to protect satellites is going to be signed. there is going to be a lot of talk around climate and public health. These are agendas close to Biden's heart, and building supply chains because of disruptions in the wake of COVID, and the world in general becoming wary of China's inability or genuine disinterest in obeying the rules-based order. Mr. Grossman, I just want to bring you in very quickly. What are the expectations from Mr. Modi on some of these other issues, climate change, public health, free and open Indo-Pacific region?
From Modi's perspective, you're asking, right?
From the American perspective, sir.
Oh, from the American perspective. Okay, I forgot I'm here to represent the American perspective. Well, let me just actually first mention that I see dump Russia is up above my head. That's not my position. I just want to be clear.
Okay.
I understand that every country needs to engage constantly with each other. Nobody should be dumping anybody. But what I have been arguing is that India's relationship with Russia, I think, is increasingly irrelevant in the international system today and is actually quite deleterious to New Delhi's interests going forward if it aspires truly to be a great power. With all of that said, I think the United States under the Biden administration, again, is looking at the relationship in a much more comprehensive manner. And I don't think that the Russia issue is necessarily going to put a dent in that. There are many issues on the table, as you mentioned, climate change, pandemic recovery, supply chains, all of those things, and obviously free and open Indo-Pacific to counter China. All of those things, I think, are in the mutual interests of New Delhi and Washington to continue working on together despite the Russia issue.
What do you think is going to be Prime Minister's message this evening to Biden? General Bakshi.
Look, the Prime Minister...
Gentlemen, good
Modi
to be over here. Thank you.
And President
Good to
Biden.
be here. Thank you. We ready? Okay. Prime Minister Modi, it's always good to see you. I'm looking forward to seeing you in Japan about the 24th of May. And I was honored to welcome you to the White House last September to discuss U.S.-Indian relations, to meet with our fellow Quad leaders. And I'm pleased to have this opportunity to speak to you today virtually and with your two ministers and your ambassador here in person. Is it contemporaneous? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. There's two vibrant democracies who one is learning how to make sure I can do this contemporaneously. But two vibrant democracies. We take the same concerns about the global challenges we face with COVID-19, advancing health security and tracking the climate crisis, and we share a strong and growing major defense partnership. At the root of our partnership is a deep connection between our people, ties of family, of friendship, and of shared values. On that note, I want to welcome India's humanitarian support for the people of Ukraine, who are suffering a horrific assault, including a tragic shelling in a train station last week that killed dozens of innocent children and women and civilians attempting to flee the violence. The United States and India are going to continue our close consultation on how to manage the destabilizing effects of this Russian war. And I'm looking forward to our discussions today, Mr. Prime Minister. Our continued consultation and dialogue are key to ensuring the U.S.-Indian relationship continues to grow deeper and stronger, delivering our people and our global good that we all are seeking to manage, particularly in your part of the world. And the floor is yours, Mr. Prime Minister.
प्रेसिडेंट बाइडेन, सबसे पहले मैं आपके गर्मजोशी भरे शब्दों के लिए आभार प्रकट करना चाहता हूं। आज हमारे रक्षा और विदेश मंत्री कुछ देर बाद 2+2 फॉर्मेट में मिलेंगे। उससे पहले हमारी यह मुलाकात उनकी बातचीत को दिशा देने के लिए महत्वपूर्ण है और इस वर्चुअल मुलाकात का इनिशिएटिव आपने लिया, इसके लिए भी मैं आपका अभिनंदन करता हूं। एक्सेलेंसी, पिछले साल सितंबर में जब मैं वॉशिंगटन आया था और जिसका आपने अभी जिक्र भी किया, और तब आपने कहा था कि भारत अमेरिका पार्टनरशिप बहुत सी वैश्विक समस्याओं के समाधान में योगदान दे सकती है। मैं आपकी बात से पूर्णतया सहमत हूं। विश्व के दो सबसे बड़े और पुराने लोकतंत्रों के रूप में हम नेचुरल पार्टनर्स हैं और पिछले कुछ वर्षों में हमारे संबंधों में जो प्रगति हुई है, जो नया मोमेंटम बना है, आज से एक दशक पहले भी शायद ऐसी कल्पना करना मुश्किल था। एक्सेलेंसी, आज की हमारी बातचीत ऐसे समय पर हो रही है जब यूक्रेन में स्थिति बहुत चिंताजनक बनी हुई है। कुछ सप्ताह पहले तक 20,000 से अधिक भारतीय यूक्रेन में फंसे हुए थे और इनमें से अधिकांश युवा छात्र थे। काफी मेहनत के बाद हम उन्हें वहां से सकुशल निकालने में सफल हुए। हालांकि एक छात्र ने अपना जीवन खो दिया। इस पूरे घटनाक्रम के दौरान मैंने यूक्रेन और रूस दोनों के राष्ट्रपतियों से कई बार फोन पर बातचीत की। मैंने न सिर्फ शांति की अपील की, बल्कि मैंने राष्ट्रपति पुतिन को यूक्रेन के राष्ट्रपति के साथ सीधी बातचीत का सुझाव भी रखा। हमारी संसद में भी यूक्रेन के विषय पर बहुत विस्तार से चर्चा हुई। हाल में बूचा शहर में निर्दोष नागरिकों की हत्याओं की खबर बहुत ही चिंताजनक थी। हमने इसकी तुरंत निंदा की और एक निष्पक्ष जांच की मांग भी की है। हम आशा करते हैं कि रूस और यूक्रेन के बीच चल रही बातचीत से शांति का मार्ग निकलेगा। एक्सेलेंसी, हमने यूक्रेन में सिविलियन जनता की सुरक्षा और उनको मानवीय सहायता की निर्बाध आपूर्ति पर भी महत्व दिया है और जिसका अभी आपने प्रारंभ में जिक्र भी किया। हमने अपनी तरफ से दवाइयां व अन्य राहत सामग्री यूक्रेन और उनके पड़ोसी देशों को भेजी है और यूक्रेन की मांग पर हम शीघ्र ही दवाइयों का एक और कंसाइनमेंट भेज रहे हैं। एक्सेलेंसी, आपने अपने कार्यकाल के शुरू में ही एक बहुत महत्वपूर्ण स्लोगन दिया था, डेमोक्रेसी कैन डिलीवर। भारत और अमेरिका की पार्टनरशिप की सफलता इस स्लोगन को सार्थक करने का सबसे उत्तम जरिया है। इस साल भारत अपनी स्वतंत्रता की 75वां वर्षगांठ मना रहा है और हम अपने डिप्लोमेटिक रिलेशंस की 75वीं सालगिरह भी मना रहे हैं। मुझे विश्वास है कि भारत की अगले 25 सालों की विकास यात्रा में अमेरिका के साथ हमारी मित्रता एक अभिन्न अंग रहेगी। एक बार फिर आज के आयोजन के लिए आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
Minister. We're going to hold for just a moment, Mr. Prime Minister, while the press leaves the room.